Do. Hey, everybody. Come on in here. Come on, everybody. Gather around. Grab your beverage. Warmer the better. Beverage, that is. It's time for Coffee with Scott Adams, where I will fill you in on the news in a way that you're not getting otherwise. Time to raise your mug or glass or beverage or container of fluids and join me in a simultaneous sip. Oh, that is good simultaneous sipping. So, one of the things I've been saying since the election is that the media, the reporters that is, are somewhat handicapped because they don't have traditional business experience and they're covering a president who is a untraditional, but at least he's a regular business person. And that when business people do ordinary business strategy, ordinary business negotiating, ordinary business holding a meeting, that a reporter, when they look at it, they're like, well, I've never seen this before, and they can't quite interpret it correctly. And we're seeing that maybe, I wasn't in the room, but it looks like we're seeing that again. Now, and I'm talking about the report, the firestorm report, I think the New York Times is reporting, that Trump tried to can Mueller back in the summer. Now, the way it's reported is that Trump ordered his lawyer to go fire Mueller or to have it, basically have it done. And the lawyer refused, and so it didn't happen. Now, yeah, of course, it's an unnamed source. Now, other people are reporting, I think Fox News, that he simply raised the question. What happens if I were to fire him? Now, chances are that the way Trump holds a meeting about any topic, and we've seen this kind of reporting before. Do you remember early in the administration when there was another anonymous report that said he asked, why can't we use a nuclear weapon on ISIS? Do you remember that? And you thought, my God, well, this is sort of the same situation. And I think there was at least one other reporting, I'm forgetting, in which somebody reported that he wanted to do something, but really it was probably a question of why can't we do this? So let me give you a little insight on a normal high-end business meeting. If you were, let's say you were Donald Trump, the developer, before you were president, and you said, I want to build a building on this property, and your lieutenants come in and they say, that won't work because there's a historical church on the property, you want to build a hotel. Now, if Donald Trump were not an experienced business person, he would say, I'll cancel my plans. I want to build a hotel there, but there's a historical church on the site. Does that sound like how he would approach that? Or would he at least ask the following question? Can we tear down the church? Now, in all likelihood, the answer is no, you can't tear down a church. And that's it. But you're certainly going to ask the question. So if you're in a situation in which you're looking at this Mueller situation, you want to know, is there any scenario, that you can stretch your powers? Can we fire him? And he may have put it in the question of a challenge. All right, I want him fired. Tell me why you can't do it. And then his lawyer told him why it was a bad idea, and then he didn't do it. The normal way that an executive challenges advisors is by putting it in the form of, tell me why I can't do this. And so it's going to sound a lot like he's giving the order and then a lieutenant said you can't do it. So that would be the normal way a high-end executive would hold a meeting. Every time somebody told him he couldn't do something, he'd say, sure I can. tell me why I can't do this. And then if that person can't give him a really convincing reason, he assumes he can do it. So if he says, why can't I put a hotel where there's that historical church, and he says, why can't we just tear it down? There may be some scenario in which you could pay to tear it down, you could pay to relocate it, you could build around it. You challenge all these, if you're somebody like Trump, you challenge every assumption. Is there a reason I can't use a nuclear weapon on ISIS? Yes, there are 3 good reasons. 1, 2, 3. Okay, done. Is there a reason I can't use mother of all bomb on Afghanistan? Well, not a strong reason. Okay, drop it. You challenge every barrier because otherwise you don't know if you're getting the right information. So I think consistently you see the press not understand how negotiating works, how walking away from a deal works, how creating confusion and being the only person who has a clear message works. A lot of common business practices that seem foreign to people who report on stuff because they have a different kind of a business. Now, you're seeing in the news that the secret society people are not so sure that that's really literally a secret society. And when I say not so sure, what I mean is pretty much everybody's backing away from thinking that means literally a secret society. I will remind you that I said that on day 1, that you should not assume that's a real secret society. Okay? I'm guessing that the insurance policy thing might turn out to be something else. By the way, if the insurance policy, imagine this. The people who were known to be anti-Trump, if they thought he was coming in and they didn't want him as their leader, insurance policy could have been looking for another job. There are lots of things insurance policy could have meant. I'm not saying it was definitely talking about getting another job. I'm just saying that whenever you see anything out of context, the limit of your imagination about what else it could mean is what you're dealing with. You're not dealing with facts. You're dealing with a limit to your own imagination that you don't know what the other possibilities for why somebody would say that would be. Somebody, let's see. I'm just reading your comments while I take a simultaneous sip, and you should too. So, I haven't really caught up on all the Davos stuff, but here's what I know. I just saw a interview where somebody looked like I couldn't tell from the accent, either British or Australian. I know if you're not American, you're very mad at me for not being able to tell if an accent was British or Australian. But one of the attendees was saying how clever the Trump's speech was for getting the crowd on his side. And is it my imagination, or is the Davos thing going really, really well for the president? I'm not following it as closely as I could. So is that the impression everybody else is getting, that it's going really well? Yeah, he's being treated like a superstar. His speeches are going over well. They're blunt. They're clear. And he's consistent. All right. And notice that every time he goes overseas, he's the star. I think my favorite part of the whole Davos thing. Tell me if you agree with this. My favorite part of the Davos thing is he said it's the biggest crowd they've ever had. as if it really, as if measuring the crowd size at Davos is a legitimate is a legitimate measure of anything. Plus, I'm sure he doesn't know if it's the biggest crowd ever. But everybody's reporting it. He knows he's the star. He knows he's the star because he is, right? It's just being reported that way because they weren't sure he was going to go. And then he says, it's the biggest crowd ever. He's treating it like it was a play and he's the only actor in it. That might be one of the funniest things he's ever said. And it kills me that people don't know. People still don't know what he's doing. Oh God, that's funny. It's the biggest crowd ever for Davos. And of course it only works because he is killing it. Right? It wouldn't be funny if he was also floundering in some way. But since he's doing a good job there, it's like, yeah, it's the biggest crowd they've ever had at Davos. And he knows they're going to fact check it. And then all you're going to remember, wow, it was a big crowd for President Trump at Davos. Oh, sorry. Oh, my God, that's funny. All right. I tweeted a hashtag this morning. I'm trying to see if I can get it trending. I tweeted that if I'm ever impeached, if that ever happens to me, if I'm ever impeached, I want to be impeached for obstructing a witch hunt. If I'm going to go down in history as getting impeached, I want the reason to be that I obstructed a witch hunt. Please throw me in that briar patch, will you? Just throw me in the briar patch. If I'm the guy who obstructed a witch hunt, convict me. You can put that right on my Wikipedia page. Yeah, and then Jim Acosta, I don't know if he jumped the shark long ago or he's doing it. He started yelling, what did he yell? Mr. President, you said America first, but here you are rubbing elbows with other bigwigs. And I'm thinking, what? What? You're here rubbing elbows with other bigwigs? How do you explain that? It's called being president. Man, oh man. So let's talk about the immigration proposal. Breitbart is reporting that Trump made a negotiating mistake because he bid against himself, essentially, which is a classic negotiating mistake. And what he did was, instead of saying 800,000 DACA people would be covered, his proposal said 1.8. But it also asked for a lot more money, and somebody said E-Verify was in there. I don't know if that's assumed in one of the bullet points or not. I don't know the details of that. But E-Verify is not one of the bullet points. I just don't know if it's assumed under one of them. And a lot of people are arguing that this, is a violation of his promises, etc. But this whole amnesty thing is fascinating because there are two ways to look at this negotiation. So one way is the Breitbart way, which is since the 1.8 million people covered had never been on the table until Trump himself put it there, that would generally be bad negotiating technique. You wouldn't offer something to somebody that they hadn't even asked for. It wasn't even demanded yet. But the one exception that you would do that, and it's a tricky thing here, but there's one exception where you would do that. And that's when you know where the negotiation is going to end up. If you are so experienced that you just know where it's going to end up, you can just go there. All right. I've actually had negotiations. I can't tell you how many negotiations I've had in my life, but as part of being the Dilbert guy, there are lots of contracts and deals and licensing and book rights and book contracts, and so I have negotiated, and that was also my job in my corporate world for years, was negotiating contracts. So I've negotiated a lot as part of my own dealings. And there are negotiations where before you even start, you already know how they're going to end because you've done it a lot. You just know where it's going to end. And there are times where you just jump to it and just say, all right, we both know where this is going to go. I'm going to say this, you're going to say this, I'm going to say this, you're going to say this. This is where we're going to meet. Do you want to just go there? I've had that very conversation. And do you know what the other person says? They go, yep, that's where we're going to end up. Let's just do it. All right? So if you're very experienced, you already know where it's going to end up. And sometimes you can just, shortcut it. Now, that does give you the risk, as Breitbart and Joel Pollack in particular pointed out today, it looks like bidding against yourself, because on that one line item, you're giving something that they didn't even ask for. But you're also asking for something that hadn't been discussed yet or had already been, ejected. So if you look at the one line item, it's bidding against himself. You would never do that. But if you look at it as a package, he said, all right, I'm going to ask for something so big I know you would reject it if it were a loan, such as $25 billion for the wall. There's no way the other side was going to accept that if he just proposed that by itself. So in order to shortcut a step, he gave them something they were surely going to ask for, the 1.8 million people. There's no way they weren't going to ask for that. And there's no way he wasn't going to ask for the full wall. So he just shortcut it and said, let's put it out there. Now, as others have pointed out, Bill Mitchell in particular is pointing this out today, there's a little bit of a setup involved, because he caused the Democrats to do what they just did, which is reject a plan that had amnesty for 1.8 million people, even more than the people that were in the original negotiations. It was the main thing that the Democrats wanted, and the only thing he's asking for in return for giving the Democrats the main thing they wanted, wait for it, is limits on chain migration, which is polling at something like 2-to-1 favorable in the whole country. That's not unreasonable. Securing the border. There are lots of arguments about the way to do it, but it's not unreasonable. Most people want a secure border and are willing to spend money to get there because that's the only way to do it. Whether it's a wall or other things, that's where the argument is, but that's not the important part of the argument. So Trump has created a situation in which he's made what anybody would say is a reasonable offer that just got rejected. Now, what did the Democrats, what did they do in rejecting it? Well, they did what he did recently, which is they thought they had a reasonable offer and he rejected it flat. It's good negotiating technique to reject a perfectly good offer, because you might get a little more. It's exactly what Trump did, right? He rejected their offer. He hoped to get a little bit more. And so far, there's a good chance that he will. So the Democrats could be expected to reject it to try to get a little bit more. But we don't know if this is a hard reject or just a let's see if we can get a little bit more reject. Could be either one. We don't know yet. But correct me if I'm wrong about this next part. All right, so I need some fact checking for this next part. And by the way, to me, this is the fascinating part about this medium, this Periscope, is that you can fact check me in real time. I don't know is there any other medium that you can fact check somebody in real time? The so-called nuclear option is just, getting 51, well, I don't know, I'm not even sure if the nuclear option applies in this case. Wouldn't Trump now be in the position to go with a fully 51% Republican-only vote if he could get it? I don't know if he could get it with this offer, but he could get this. There's nothing that would stop him from passing this with just Republicans, right? Now that, and imagine if you will, but is the nuclear option, does that apply to every kind of vote, or is the nuclear option only involved with budgets? That's the part I don't know. Yeah. So, because the defense is involved, and that's a budget item, you need the 60%. Is that true? Because the president may have lured them into a narrow canyon. Imagine, so remember there's two ways to win, no ways to lose. That's the president's normal technique. What I'm seeing now, and this is sort of a preliminary opinion, I'm not too confident about this one, but it's what looks like it's shaping up to be. If the Democrats agree to this deal in some fashion, then the president gets the win because he got immigration. Now his base will be very mad, but if there's a tough path to citizenship, meaning they either have to buy their way in, go to the back of the line, serve in the military, or some set of requirements like that, that's not rewarding them. That's putting them at the back of the line, unless they pay a whole bunch of money. And these are people who are basically Americans in spirit. They've been here. They're Americans by residency, by spirit, by internal definition, by external definition. They just aren't technically Americans. So you can treat them a little bit special because they're just not like, immigrants who have never been here. So to me, it seems that the president can sell this package to his base and have a big win under the condition that the Democrats say yes to this or something close to it. Now, if the Democrats stay with their hard no, which is where they are right now, so they're at no, and if that turns into a hard no, can't the president just push for the nuclear option? And he would end up with a package that, wait for it, is probably approved by the public by maybe 2-1. And then the president of the United States is the one who gave a good deal to the DACA people, not the Democrats. The Democrats asked for 800,000 people. The president offered 1.8 million. If Republicans pass this with a bare majority instead of 60%, the Republicans are the ones that serve the public. It's a huge win. Trump wins if the Democrats approve his package in some form, and he wins bigger if they don't, as long as he still gets it approved. Because he would take the Democrats' biggest weapon against him, or only weapon? Is it the only weapon they have for 2018? Am I wrong? It's literally the only weapon they have for 2018. Well, healthcare. They still have healthcare, but he has time to deal with that as well. It's possible he has created a situation by bidding against himself, as Breitbart correctly points out, right? From a strict, negotiating perspective, if the only thing in the conversation was, if we offered 800,000 people or 1.8 million, that is bidding against yourself. because he upped the amount he's offering without a demand to force it. But when seen as a package, he's created a situation where the Democrats either have to agree with him, and he gets the win, or they have to disagree with him, and then he has moral authority at that point, having offered them really the best, having offered them more than they asked for. He has moral authority to pass it with a bare majority. And it barely sets a precedent. You know, you always worry about precedent with this bare majority stuff. Excuse me. I just love the fact that I can blow my nose on live camera. So, all right, now fact check me. Is anything I said just now crazy? All right. So my main point is that he wins if the Democrats approve it in some form close to what he proposed. His base won't like it, but if he gets a wall, the wall is big and visual, right? As I have often pointed out, the visual is going to win. If he gets the wall, he gets the big visual thing he mostly promised at the price of a concept that we can't see. All right? The concept we can't see is that 1.8 million people who are already here living like residents and like citizens will continue living here like residents and citizens. You won't even notice. In other words, nothing happens with the 1.8 million that you can see. There is no visual change. Now, deporting them would be a big visual change because that would be all over the news. But not doing anything is nothing. There's nothing you can see. Nothing changed. But the wall will change. You start building that wall, people forget about the thing that nothing happened. You couldn't see anything. We didn't notice any change with that 1.8 million people. They just went to work, went to school just like every other day. You won't even notice. But you're sure going to notice the stuff he got. Yeah, I don't know where E-Verify is in this conversation, frankly. All right. So, for those who say no amnesty, don't get caught up in what I call word thinking. So word thinking is that you have your own personal definition for a word, and it might not be what other people's definition of a word is. And so you think you're having an argument, but you're just defining a word the way you like it. So if you could, for those of you, so here's a question to those of you who say no amnesty. Is it amnesty if they go to the end of the line? Is it amnesty if they have to apply and go to the end of the line like everybody else? Do you call that amnesty? I mean, by definition, is that amnesty? Because that's a path to citizenship. How about if the only way you could become a citizen is to pay $10,000, which goes toward the construction of the wall, hypothetically? Is that amnesty? So somebody says yes. I'm not sure if you're answering the same question because there's a timing lag. But I don't think that's amnesty because that's a penalty. You know, I think what most Republicans, what most conservatives want is they want a world where people play by the same rules, which means if you break a law, there's a penalty. So if you don't get a benefit for breaking the law, I don't know. I think the whole amnesty thing, we're going to be caught up in the word as opposed to what it actually means in the real world. The legal fees are about $5,000 now to become a citizen. Is that true? That might be true. Going to the end of the line is a penalty. Well, it's a penalty for someone who thinks they are essentially Americans. Imagine, if you will, that you believe you're American, you've lived here since you can remember, your identity is American, you're bleeding red, white, and blue. Imagine that that's yourself. You self-identify as just American. And then somebody says, you can't be a citizen, you don't have the same rights, go to the end of the line, which might take 10 years. You're not going to feel like you got a favor. You're going to feel like you're being discriminated against. Now, by law, you're not. And so as long as the law is satisfied, I think it can sell. Yeah, military goes to the front of the line. I think most people would be okay with that. Yeah, most people can get behind the military option. How many of you could get behind the option of paying $10,000 that goes toward the wall in order to get to the front of the line? How about just that question? Just say yes if you would be willing, if you're okay with them paying $10,000 toward the wall to get a. So no. Why would you not take free money? Who would not take money? Because you realize they're already here, right? You're not giving them anything. They're already here. So I think the people who are saying no could warm up to it. I think there's a little bit of maybe an emotional no. People still have their feelings a little bit bruised because they expected a different result than they're getting. But in a negotiation, everybody's going to be a little bit unhappy. $10,000 to get in line. So somebody's saying $10,000 to get in the back of the line. That's not crazy. That's not crazy at all. My personal bias would be $10,000 for the front of the line because that gives them incentive to do it. $10,000 for the back of the line, I think most people would say, screw it, I won't even bother. I'll let my kids become citizens. Or $10,000 for the back of the line, $25,000 for the front of the line. So yes, maybe there's just a price difference. But I also said that Americans who want to contribute to the Americanization of specific people, they should have a mechanism. They should have an app or a web page, fundraising thing that says, hey, this person only has $7,000. They need a few extra thousand to get to the front of the line. Who wants to kick in $1? I wouldn't complain about that. What's the financial burden on taxpayers? Well, the financial, I guess we could calculate that. That's not a terrible idea to figure out the financial burden. But the thing is that every individual has a different financial implication. Some are positive, some are not. Yeah. I think deport is just no longer part of the conversation. Realistically. Now that the president's put this on the table, the only thing he has to offer is not offering them stable residency, but actually physically shipping them back. That's not really on the table anymore. And I don't think it should be, and I don't think it ever was going to be, realistically. Now, can we go back in time to show that another one of my predictions is coming true? I would like to do another victory lap, if we could. And it looks like this. When I was first writing about President Trump and his extreme policies, I said, and not many people, I don't know, honestly, I can't think of anybody else who said this. I said that he was going to pivot toward the middle, but it would be the right side of the middle. In other words, his extraordinary opening bid of just ship everybody back, close the borders from, all Muslim immigrants, and that all of that stuff was just a super aggressive opening bid, so that what he could really get is just a more effective immigration policy that would, be tighter, extreme vetting, etc. Based on his current immigration offer, would you say that my prediction from 2 years ago, on which I bet my entire frickin' career that he would not stay with the extreme positions, but would pivot toward the right side of the middle, would you agree that we are there? Is there anybody who would disagree with my characterization based on the current immigration offer that he has gone from his extreme candidacy position to the right side of the middle? Somebody disagreed with that? Right. Do you remember me saying that my support for him, at least in terms of writing good things about his persuasion, was conditional not on the policies that he was proposing? It was conditional on the fact that I believed he was a reasonable person playing a smart game to get the country what it wanted and to get himself what he wanted. And we are exactly there. We are exactly where I said we would be at this point. Okay? Correct me if I'm wrong. I didn't hear one other person during the entire race who said that this would be the case and that we would be right here, right now. I didn't hear anybody else say it. Nobody on the left, nobody on the right. Right? And yeah, and I tell you, I really appreciate those of you who've been here since the beginning who can validate that I called this 2 years ago. And I think you can also validate that, well, I'll validate this for you. Because of that gutsy call, I'm not going to call myself gutsy. I rescind that. Because of that call, I lost 75% of my friends and a third of my income. And I stuck with it. In large part, mostly, really. When I say in large part, I don't know if there's any other part. Close to 100% of the reason that I stuck with it, lost my friends, lost my income, lost my reputation, is because I thought it was good for the country. I believed that he was bringing a package of benefits that was unprecedented and that we'd never seen anything like it. And we may never see anything like it again. We brought in somebody that we said is going to break everything that is already there. And he had the tools, the persuasion tools specifically, to build it better. But on top of that, he had the business tools. Now, and I said that while you're looking at his, let's say attention to details, which hasn't mattered at all, while you're looking at his experience as a politician, which mattered a little when he was forming a government, but really he didn't have much to pick from because he was so ostracized by the right. He had a small pool of people. So that did matter a little bit, the lack of experience in government. But already we're seeing benefits that it looks like he's already overcome that and a lot. Look what he's doing to the economy. His changing of his removing restrictions in terms of regulations, and his changes to the tax policy, and his optimism talking the economy up. This is all persuasion. All right. Remember I told you that when he and Pence hit the ground running before they were even inaugurated and they were talking to Carrier and Ford, and I said that's the new CEO play, where you set the stage for who you are like on day one. He did it before day one. He did it before he was even inaugurated. He was saying, I'm about keeping companies here, dealing with specific companies, calling them out. So, yeah, you probably saw in Davos, Trump did an interview in which he said, nobody saw this coming, that all the companies are announcing that they're giving back to their employees because of the tax break. Well, I will agree that nobody saw it coming. But here's where I'm going to add a little bit of a twist. I've been saying since the beginning that the president is a systems player, not a goal player. In other words, he runs systems that can get you more benefits than maybe you were even imagining. Because a system gives you lots of ways to win and not just one like a goal does. A goal, you've got to hit that one goal. A system gives you lots of ways to win. It seems to me that on day one, when Pence and Trump called out Carrier and Ford for doing an extra good job, forget about whether the details of what they said they would do actually happen. It's irrelevant to this point. He called them out for doing a good job. And when companies have done things he didn't like, he's called them out. I can't think of one. But this president has called out individual companies more than anybody has ever called out individual companies. Will you agree with me so far? Right? He has called out individual companies from day one, before inauguration. Point where we see individual companies saying, I need to show off that I'm doing a good job, and then he calls them out, and the media is calling them out too. Is that accidental? He created this situation. His system from the start is, I'm going to call out individual companies. Day one, all right? And now we see these individual companies stepping up to maintain their reputation, to get a little attention and a little love from the president, and therefore a little bit love from the population. He created that situation, and he didn't even take credit for it. All right? If the video is frozen, you might need to leave and come back. I had an incoming call that interrupted it for a moment, but I'm pretty sure you can hear me. So that was my point, is he created a situation where these companies could come forward and try to get attention. So he has people fighting for attention and doing the right thing. So he's made supply side economics or trickle down economics, whatever you want to call it, work in a way that Reagan didn't. Because Reagan just said, hey, we'll give tax breaks to companies, and then he walked away. And then the company said, thanks for the money, we'll give it to ourselves. You know, the CEOs will keep it. President Trump created a situation where he was going to call out companies for doing well or doing poorly, leaving the country, staying in the country, hiring versus firing. And they responded accordingly. So he used persuasion on companies successfully. You see him using persuasion on ISIS by saying he's never going to leave, he's going to surround him and kill him. He changed the rules of engagement, which changed how the military operated. It changed their morale and everything else, and ISIS was quickly routed, at least as a state. President Trump changed the psychology of negotiating. All these trade deals, he made the impossible look possible. Now suddenly it looks like, well, maybe we can get better deals. Might take a while. We don't know how it's going to turn out. What about North Korea? He took something that looked impossible and he turned it into something that's looking like it's heading in the right direction. He did that with persuasion. Now that persuasion includes military assets in the movement, it includes the tweeting, the threading, the threats, the economic stuff. And here again with the economic sanctions on North Korea, he's not playing it the way it was played in the past, where you just say to China, hey, how about doing some sanctions, and then nothing happens, and then North Korea has more nukes. He didn't do that. He's created the same situation he created with ISIS. Instead of saying, hey, ISIS, we're just going to be here for a year, then we'll leave, he said, we're going to go after every company individually. We don't care what the nation they come from, every ship and every person forever. That's completely different psychology than North Korea's ever seen. Nobody ever said, I mean, the forever part we just know because of his personality, right? He's not going to quit until he wins, and he's in a winning position. You don't quit when you're in a winning position. And he has the ability, over time, to squeeze North Korea's economy forever. You know, we've got satellites. We can see what they're doing and what they're not doing. So if you look at all these things where he's used business strategy and psychology to get a good result, you start seeing a pattern. And then you look at the immigration thing, and it's hard not to see that as potentially a win-win situation for him. He wins if the Democrats say yes, and he wins if they say no, and he has to take it to a nuclear option. Republicans get the win. And they're the ones who allow DACA to stay and have a path to citizenship, even if it's a difficult path, and probably needs to be for public opinion. Fun to watch you bend into a pretzel to praise dear leader. So let's call you the pretzel people. So for 2 years, people have been saying, you're bending into a pretzel. You know, his complete incompetence and stupidity. You're acting like it's actually brilliant. And then he won the Republican nomination. And then they said, you're bending into a pretzel, his campaigning, you know, you're making his stupidity and all of his wrong moves. You're bending into a pretzel. You're making all of his stupid moves look like they're brilliant or something. And then he won the presidency. Oh, you're bending into a pretzel, all of his stupid policies as president. You're making it seem like these are actually smart policies. And then the stock market hit an all-time high. You're bending into a pretzel. You're actually justifying all the stupid things he's saying. And then the small business confidence level hit the highest level ever. You're bending into a pretzel. All of his performance. And then black unemployment hit its best level of all time. You're bending into a pretzel. He wasn't even in the military. And then ISIS was defeated on the battlefield in 1 year. You're bending into a pretzel. He's really crazy. He's going to cause a nuclear war. And then North Korea said, hey, how about we join you on the Olympics and maybe talk about better communication, a little bit of travel. Do you see a pattern here? Pretzel people. Pretzel people, do you see the pattern yet? Okay. 4 years from now, or 7 years from now, are you going to see the pattern? Is it going to emerge at all, pretzel people? I hope not, because you're very entertaining. All right, I'm going to take off now and do some other things.